facts. This isn't just a story about an ABC presenter or an Indigenous man or the ABC as an institution. I think it raises some very deep questions about racism, the role the media plays in reporting on questions of our history as a country. And these are really, really heavy and important issues that we need to be talking about, but we also need to be talking about responsibly, thinking about the real-life consequences on people. And what's happened to Stan Grant is unacceptable. A lot of the language we've heard so far, and this certainly was why I asked these very high-ranking politicians, has been about trolls. That trolls are wrong, that it's wrong that trolls attack people, and there's no doubt that trolling and social media, the cesspit that it can often be, is part of the problem. But a bigger issue, which I think does raise some sometimes very difficult questions, is the role that the media itself plays in having and conducting these debates and the platforming and the way that it deals with that debate. Now, Justin Stevens, who's our boss here, Director of News and Current Affairs here at the ABC, raised the question yesterday in relation to News Corporation. And I've worked at News Corporation and I believe in being very honest about what I observe, and News Corporation was responsible for a lot of the reporting about Stan Grant and as he has described, a twisting of his words. Now, anyone who watched that coverage, and I did, on Coronation Night will know that Stan Grant was talking about history and how Indigenous Australians feel. He is an Indigenous man. And I heard nothing in his language which was offensive, unless you're offended by the truth of Indigenous Australians. And I think that's the broader question. Now, sites like the Australian newspaper and some of the commentary that they allow under their stories is pretty vile sometimes. I wonder who's doing the moderation, and I asked that question to them. We did invite them onto our program today. They declined the invitation. But today I asked those hard questions of the politicians, because it's not just anonymous trolls, it's actually some of our very powerful media organisations that are having these discussions in a pretty spiteful way sometimes and in a pretty exaggerated way. I put this to the Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles, and here was his response.
To have a situation where somebody of Stan Grant's experience and calibre is in a position of feeling that this is the only step he can take has got to give all of us pause for thought. And I think every media outlet needs to be listening and being very thoughtful about this moment in terms of the way in which they engage going forward.
That's the Deputy Prime Minister, Richard Marles. Now, he wouldn't single out News Corporation. I did ask him, because that is the accusation that is now very much in the public discourse about, I saw a crikey story about the number of references to this contribution that Stan Grant had made during the coronation about colonisation and the legacy for Indigenous Australians. Facts that are indisputable, as you know. Indigenous Australians have been very adversely affected by the way colonisation has been implemented in this country, and we're having a conversation about that. We can't have that conversation by censoring Aboriginal Australians who want us to engage in it. And that's what we do. That's what journalists do. That's what the truth is, and the truth sometimes hurts, but it doesn't mean that you don't hear it. I also put it to Julian Leeser. Now, Julian Leeser was on the front bench for the Liberal Party. He was the spokesman on Indigenous Australians. He stepped down to support The Voice, but he was actually involved in the coverage on the coronation. And to his credit, he called out what he found as pretty offensive commentary about Stan Grant very early on after the coverage, and here was his response on our program this morning.
I think everybody has a responsibility to lift the standard of public debate in this country, and I'm really sad that it's had this effect on Stan. I've reached out to him personally, and I hope we see him resuming his public role again soon.
And that's Julian Leeser. And of course, we all do hope he resumes his public role. But ultimately, I've seen a bit of commentary today about, can't we have these debates? Absolutely, we can have these debates. In fact, we must. But trying to silence people who are telling us their truth is not really the way to have an honest debate. An honest debate is about allowing all perspectives to be heard. And certainly the perspective of Indigenous Australians is pretty key in this critical moment in our history. So Yes, a show today. We covered the visit of Modi to Australia, as you were just talking about, a huge moment, particularly for the Indian diaspora. We talked about China with the Deputy Prime Minister, but this issue around race relations in our country and the way institutions respond, I think, is a big one, particularly in the year of the Voice referendum, Karina.
Yeah, and whatever your views on the ABC's coronation coverage, there is just absolutely no excuse for racism directed or targeted at anyone. And I think that's probably one of the most basic principles here around this discussion. And for Stan, we wish him all the best and we wish him well, because he does such amazing work with not just Indigenous reporters at the ABC, but all reporters from called backgrounds. He acts as a mentor to a lot of us, and so we wish him all the best, and the media is poorer without his contribution to it.
That's very true. Karina, thank you.